Yes, we are.
Breakfast champions going. Everyone let us know how we're sounding, how we're looking. We a little on the bright side? That light might be a little bit too bright.
Ooh. We're good at that, knowing what people want. Ah, there it is. Click on it. Give me the feed. Yeah. All right. Good.
Hopefully that's looking a little better.
Yeah.
Doo-doo.
Good morning.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
To all.
Good morning to you. Good morning, dear people. And welcome to another episode of the Genus Brewing live stream. For those of you who are not aware, this is a live stream we attempt to do every single Sunday at 8:45 Pacific Standard Time in the morning. And the general breakdown is we play some TikToks out loud. Then we go over some Genus Brewing news, stuff that's happened in Genus or in the beer industry this week. And then we go into...
Check it off. Someone's at the door.
Yeah. Beer of the week. And then 2 discussion topics. And today we're going to be tackling why nutrients are a thing. Why do you need a nutrient? And then the other thing we're going to be talking about is all about base malts, what all you get off your base malts, and why you want to think about that when you're choosing how to make a recipe. So that's what we got going on today. I'm still pulling up my...
You have it like right there, though.
Yeah, but I like to have it on both.
Yeah. That is good.
Pulling up my thing so I can watch all you guys' comments.
Frazzle, you're here just in time.
Yeah. So, you want to start off with the joke, or?
Yeah, hang on. Let me remember how this starts. I have most of it in my head, but, you know, it's always good not to bungle it the first time.
I agree to disagree.
You know.
Woo!
Dun, 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 dun.
We read your minds every time. Nice. Cool.
Yeah. Why are cows so famous?
Are they movie stars?
They're outstanding in their field.
Nah.
That was a good one. All right. So, let's get into this. And by this, I mean beer.
And a cup of noodles. It's my breakfast.
And a cup of noodles.
Breakfast
and a cup
of
of noodles.
champions.
Ooh, ouch. We should drink this.
There we go. A little bit of Genus Brewing news. The newest batch of Castor Muncher is on tap right now, and we're excited for this one because our newest hire, Warren, who's our kitchen dude, is also a coffee roaster, and he made the coffee that's going into the Castor Muncher, which is pretty dope. Yeah.
It is. That's going to be absolutely awesome. It was smelling amazing going into the beer. I was rather intrigued and excited to see what was going to come out of here.
And we did a little bit of maple too, so it's a maple coffee Kolsch light beer that looks mapley and coffee-y.
There we go.
Will cup of noodles beer? Of course it will.
Have we done that one?
No, we haven't.
Yeah. The only thing to watch out for that is the sodium content in the flavoring.
Yeah.
That will do some
tincture.
things.
There's always a way. New food menu launching tomorrow, speaking of Warren. So we hired him to do our kitchen prep and make sure that we have food available. Our food menu will be launching tomorrow, and it's going to be themed around kind of healthy stuff. So a lot of keto-friendly options, basically bowls of healthy stuff all piled on top of each other. We figure we got pizza right next door for anybody who needs that greasy fix. So we're just going to kind of tackle a different side of things.
There will definitely be a super, super fancy Lunchable. That will be on the menu. I think it's got a fancy French name, but I can't pronounce that. So it's just an adult Lunchable. Actually, that is what we should call it.
Adult Lunchable?
Adult Lunchable. So that'll be fantastic, and we're gonna go from there. We're gonna do some experimentations into pickling and maybe fermented pickles and.
Who sent this one?
Stuff. We had a bunch of them for him. He had the really good Gosa.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Remember?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this is tasting pretty tasty, so definitely in that northwesty kind of feel. It's got that maltiness, so
Yeah, it's really nice not to see any oxidation on this too, because this was bottled in
2020.
2020, you know, so that's nice. Way to go. If this is you, good job. I mean, we kind of know who you are because we could go back and like actually rewatch that and figure it out, but that's effort.
Shark coochie tray.
And that's not the worst one I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will be having meats and cheeses, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, are you done with the Genus Brewing news?
Let's see. Didn't we? Oh, we have a new stout on tap.
Oh,
That's
really tasty
delicious.
stout. Yeah, doing really good.
A lot like our other stout, our tropical stout, but actually beefed a lot more of the center sweet chocolatey coffee flavors in it. Still drops off really nice and clean. Lutra was fantastic for that.
Yeah.
Nice and light, easy to drink. Do we have any other news? I don't think so. Yeah, that's it.
Well, then I guess it's.
Oh no!
Ah!
New shirts. I don't know if we've seen these.
Oh,
if
yeah,
we've shown them before.
I think those were last week.
Well, we talked about them last week, but now you get to view it. Zoom in on it because they're sexy. It's awesome. Go buy some space program shirts. They're actually really cool.
And we literally are going to send someone into space eventually.
Eventually, it will happen. Throwing
that out there.
Yeah. All right, we got the food menus launching. Man, we covered it all, didn't we?
Now it's time for our beer of the week. Beer of the week. Yeah. Today's beer of the week, I picked category 7B, which is an Altbier. Wanted to go a little bit more traditional. I feel like we've gone a little bit outside the box in the last couple ones, and so we went with really standard malts, hops, and yeast for my pick. I just did a German Vienna from Best Malts. That's the one that we carry. It's really tasty for the malt.
Super tasty. I like the Best Malts one. The Great Western, it has that nice sweet side of the Vienna. The Best Malts has a little bit of toasty biscuitiness into it that I like a lot more.
Really nice grainy character. It just seems to sink in and not sink in, but stand out a little bit more in a beer like this as a proper base. And so we're gonna be using a lot of that as our base malt. In this hop of the week, I went with Pearl. A little bit of spicy, lemony notes. You'll get like notes of like black pepper in that from the Pearl as well, which goes great in an alt beer.
Mm-hmm. Pearl is really great. Pearl, I think, is kind of one of those unsung German hops in there. Everybody gets so fixated on the Hallertau, the Saaz Tettning. I know Saaz isn't German, but Saaz Tettning type.
Yeah.
Like, Pearl is one of those that gets lost a little bit. And there's a lot of styles I don't think are proper without Pearl.
Yeah.
You
know. Plus, it's got a little bit more alpha acids, which is nice. Just because this is a hoppier side of what you get off of the German styles.
On your hop of the week, I'll do a little bit different one on this. I would probably say Spalt, but Spalt is a very traditional. It's not spelt, not the malt, but Spalt is the traditional hop that does go into alt beers. It does give you a little bit more woody spice to it. Although I have read on almost everything, I haven't tried it yet, but I have read on almost everything that generally most competitions and things don't like alts hopped with Spalt. But I do. They're very tasty. Pearl is a great substitute for that, and Pearl is a great hop.
Yeah. Did you already do Mount Hood Hop of the Week? Yes, we have done a Mount Hood Hop of the Week. That's a really common go-to for us, actually. We use that hop a lot. And that would also be appropriate in a style like this. But I just liked Pearl because it's a little bit higher alpha, and you got all those bright notes that come along with it. So it's good. To complement that Pearl, that bright hoppiness, went with Urquell. Urquell is a really traditional lager yeast from like Pilsner Urquell. But the reason I chose it is it does have a little bit of minerality to it. So it have that like tingy brightness. And then depending on how you want to ferment, you can leave a little bit of sulfur production in the beer as well, which sometimes that kind of helps, just a little bit helps brighten the beer up.
And we should also mention that this is a hybrid beer on it. So this is kind of like Kolsch, where you are taking something and fermenting it out of its range. So having that Urquell yeast, fermenting it warmer on that, is really good, or taking a nice fruity ale strain like the German ale strain, but fermenting that down cooler is also a really great way to go.
Yeah, or even just the classic American hybrid strain. You can use like a Cal Lager for this. The steam yeast.
Cal Lager would absolutely be perfect. Warm, ferment it, get those extra boosted num-nums out of it.
And it's designed to put forward a little bit of that hop profile too, and a little bit of that hop profile is going to be appropriate in this style. Let's jump into some vital statistics so you kind of know what we're talking about here. The IBUs on this can be 25 to 50. That's what we mean by this can be hoppy for a German style beer.
Yeah, I'm also going to jump onto this a little bit, that they aren't broken down in BJCP, but historically there are two different styles of Altbier. The Altbier we generally think of, the one that's broken down in BJCP, and then there's the Dusseldorf Alt, which is just a little bit darker and maltier, but it's all within this range. So if you're going on the lighter, hoppier side, that will be kind of more the classic one that you're thinking about. Darker, a little bit maltier will be towards your Dusseldorf.
This style of beer is a well-balanced, well-attenuated, bitter, yet malty, clean, smooth, and amber to copper-colored German beer. The bitterness is balanced by the malt richness, but the malt intensity and character can range from moderate to high. So you can have anything from a relatively neutral base, really leaning into the hops, to a little bit maltier of a base. So you've got, think of it like the Northwest IPA of the German world, I guess.
Yeah.
Not as late and hopped, though. You don't want a lot of that hop flavor.
Oh, yeah, I guess in the history it kind of goes into that. I got ahead of myself.
Yep.
Sorry. Appearance on that. Color ranges from light amber to deep copper color, stopping short of brown. And that's pretty important. This is not a brown beer. Bronze orange is most common. Brilliant clarity with thick, creamy, long-lasting head on it. That brilliant clarity is going to be because this is a hybrid beer. You are actually supposed to cold lager it for a while.
And anytime you can have a chance to say thick, creamy, long-lasting head, I think we're in a good spot. The SRM range on this is 11 to 17, so 17 is going to be that deep amber color. That's very, very dark amber. But you don't want to use anything like Carafa that's going to turn that dark amber into like a brownie. No brownie.
Aroma. Clean yet robust, complex aroma of grainy, rich malt and spicy hop with restrained fruity esters. And I think that's actually a pretty great description of this beer. It should be big, robust, malty. You're still going to catch those nice spicy hops coming through. And that little bit of fruit is going to traditionally come from that warm fermented lager yeast, which is where Cal Lager, the warm or Cal on this, will be really nice.
It does say you'll get a little bit of that spicy. They even mentioned peppery aroma from hops. They say any Sazer type hops is going to work. Again, I think Pearl fits pretty perfect in that because it has that little bit of black pepper note to it.
Yeah, and that's where Spalt really shines through as well, is because you're getting those nice big spicy notes without that soft lemony character underneath.
Yeah, and a little bit of that woodiness so that you have wood with your thick, creamy, long-lasting head.
You should.
Flavor, flavor assertive, hot bitterness, well balanced by a sturdy yet clean, crisp malt character. The malt presence is moderate by medium high to high attenuation. So when we're talking about final gravities, this thing can go down to 1008, which is very, very dry for a beer that can be this malty. It has, again, long-lasting, medium to dry, bittersweet, or almost nutty finish. Again, that's going to be coming from a little bit of those medium biscuit base malts like the Viennas and the Munichs and stuff like that, which is a great place to start. And the apparent bitterness is sometimes masked by the malt character. So you can be, like we said before, erring a little bit on that bitter side, a little bit on that hoppy side, or that malt character can come all the way up to kind of balance that and make it a very balanced beer. Either way works.
Yeah, both will be tasty. So here we go. We'll skip the mouthfeel. We don't actually
thick, creamy, long-lasting off-white head.
That's what it should be. Comments on this coming through on it. Top fermented lagered beer fermented at cool ale temperatures, often conditioned at bottom fermentation temperatures, which is fancy words to say that you're warm fermenting lager yeast and then you're conditioning
or cold
at lager
fermenting ale yeast.
Or cold fermenting ale yeast. and then you lager it for that clean crispness coming out of there. And that's actually something that's really important to do with this beer. You can serve them fresh and they taste just fine when you do, but it's one of those beers that truly benefits from that cold lagering time. You know, it doesn't have to be too long, but at least give it like 3 to 6 weeks in there.
Characteristic ingredients, grist vary, but usually consist of German-based malts, Pils or sometimes Munich, with small amounts of the dirty C word, a little bit of chocolate. If you're going to use a chocolate-style malt, I'd probably use like chocolate wheat, something softer and fruitier, or black malts to adjust color. Again, I'd try to stay away from that and do a lot of my color adjustment from the base malts instead. Saucer-type hops, spalt is traditional, as it says. Occasionally can include wheat. I probably wouldn't use that.
I don't like wheat in there. I will say that one thing I do actually like is a very small proportion of rye. It's not necessarily traditional, but rye does help boost that little touch of spiciness coming out of there, that spicy character that is pretty indicative of the hops, especially if you can't get a hold of one of the spicier hops like Pearl or Spalt. You're using something Hallertau or Saaz. That little tiny touch, and I mean like 2 to 5%. You don't necessarily want to feel the rye, you just want that hint of something spicier.
Yeah, you're just along for the ride. Nailed it.
You nailed it so hard.
What's yelling at us back there? Tell it to stop.
Oh, that's the freezer.
I might sneeze eventually. Also, decoction mashes are traditional. That's a good thing. Got it.
There we are. So the decoction mash, I mean, that's one thing that's really nice in there because you're getting some extra color, you're getting some extra Maillard coming out of it, which is going to add to the depth of this beer, but it's also the step mashing process.
Yeah, which is part of what can contribute to this beer finishing drier. Like I said, that 1008 final gravity. That's a crispy boy, and you can get all the way down there if you want. Don't have to. You can go all the way up to 1014, which is a little thicker, but you can.
You can. Definitely. So here we go. That's our beer of the week. If you guys have any questions about it, definitely toss them at us. Yeast and the Beast, I am going to go for a toasted peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I'm going to say the same thing, but add pickles.
I mean, a pickle on the side, definitely, with some chips, so you can get the whole rounding. And if you can get a Capri Sun in on that meal, oh man, like you've got it made.
And don't forget to finish off with a Twinkie.
Although if you throw the pickles on it, I would switch it around to say peanut butter and pepper jelly with pickle chips on the sandwich. That could be really delicious.
I could see that.
Yeah.
All right, that's your answer. Send us new pictures of the lunch
and beer. All right.
Let's go on to topic number one. Topic number one, we're going to talk about yeast nutrient. What does it do? Why do we use it? We actually have a video slated at some point in time that we're supposed to be doing. We have a lot of footage from White Labs kind of diving in deep. But I wanted to go over it in the live stream so we can kind of make it more discussional and talk about all the stuff that nutrients good for. We use nutrients in almost every beer, and it's absolutely necessary in hard seltzer, so it's a good thing to know about.
Yeah, and hard seltz, one other thing to know about too is that nutrients will vary per beer, per fermentation even. Seltzer nutrients are far different than beer nutrients. They're not far different. It's just a different proportion. It's different types that go in there. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Are you sure? I mean, you want to sit down with us?
No, I gotta go.
All right. Hi.
Hi, Matt.
Everybody say hi to Matt. Bye to Matt. You got to push hard. So they do different things. And you're putting them at different places to achieve different things on there. So
we got a question already. How do nutrients differ from Energizer? The primary purpose of Energizer is actually to absorb fatty acids that are available that are in suspension, and those fatty acids can actually inhibit fermentation. So yeast Energizer makes sure that there's nothing that's going to compete or inhibit your yeast from doing its job. Yeast nutrient is just that vital nutrient, that vitamin that you need for your yeast to survive.
Yeah, one of the ways I always explain Energizer is it steadies the fermentation. It tries to really prevent spikes, and those spikes are where you're going to get stuck fermentation. And takes that fermentation chart and just narrows it down to a nice steady line and keeps it going.
Yeah.
Keeps it energized the whole time. Like having a glass of Gatorade while you're running. You know, you're keeping yourself energized and going. Rather than Flintstones, yeast, Flintstones. Rather than
Meet the Flintstones.
you know, the yeast nutrient, which is providing the food. That's like, you know, having your nice, balanced, good, energizing meal before you run that race.
Exactly. So overall, let's give a general breakdown. Why is yeast nutrient important? And to talk about that, we also need to talk about the substrates. Substrates being what your yeast are fermenting. So there is different nutritional value in different substrates. The thing that has the most nutritional value naturally is going to be your beer. Anything that's grain-based is going to have a lot more nutrients from the grains than anything that's fruit-based. And anything that's fruit-based is going to have a lot more nutrients than anything that is sugar-based.
Yeah, and this is what I'm talking about, knowing the difference between those. And actually, Frazzle Penguin has a great question on here. He wrote in, went to the local homebrew store, got something called Fermade O. We actually have some of that. Next to it is Fermade K, and this is one of those things that we're talking about right here, why that's different. Fermade K is has the diammonium phosphate, or DAP, in it. It's an inorganic source of nutrients, great for beer and things like that. Fermade O derives its nutrients from an organic source. And that is much, much better for things like seltzer. It creates a much kinder fermentation to it. Basically makes the difference between FAN and WAN on that, or free amino nitrogens. Well, I don't remember what WAN is.
Liquid amino nitrogen, loose amino nitrogens.
Basically, the FAN fermentation is nitrogens that the yeast can use more readily. So that's far more important for fruit as well as sugar fermentations, because you're getting a better, cleaner fermentation coming off of that, although it's not as easily a readable source for yeast to get a hold of, like DAP, or diammonium phosphate.
And there are a lot of people that swear by if there's too much inorganic sources of that nitrogen. The DAP, diammonium phosphate, would be the example. If there's too much of that being processed by the yeast, that your yeast can produce off flavors. Again, it's very dependent on the substrate, on what it's fermenting. However, in something like a seltzer and something like a mead, a hard cider, something like that, having too much of that nitrogen come from DAP, I've noticed it does make it sometimes fusely, or like a cheap white wine sometimes.
Yeah. So there is differences, but basically, Frazzle Penguin, if you have Fermade O, use it. It's a great yeast nutrient in there.
Yeah, and then there are calculators online if you need to know how much nitrogen you need. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll use Fermade O and then add a little bit of DAP for that inorganic source of nitrogen, just to make sure our nitrogen levels are where they need to be.
Yeah, which actually kind of is hitting on our first bullet point. I jumped ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
That's one of the big differences between most of these things. Beer, you have a lot of nutrients going in there, but there's also a lot of stuff in there to hide flavors that are on your very low threshold. So using something like Fermade K, or the inorganic yeast nutrients on that, if there's a tiny little bit of residue of that left over, generally you can't tell at all the beer flavors are on top of it. But because cider, and especially like seltzer, are so thin, if you have any extra nutrient inside of it, that's going to be a flavor that's added to your product. You should always try and hit your nutrient additions so they get fully used up, so they're not in there. But it becomes far more important when your substrate is something that has a lot more delicate flavors to it, or a lot less flavor to it.
Yeah. Even if you go into something like, let's say you're fermenting mead, just by the nature of the fact that mead's going to be higher alcohol, there's going to be a lot more flavors involved, and so that's going to be a little bit more forgiving. On the flip side of that, it's also difficult to ferment cleanly up at that higher alcohol range. So for that same reason, nutrients is going to be extra important, because you're also going to be stressing out your yeast. And so you also got to think about the total sugar load and the end alcohol when you think about why and how much nutrient to add. Great example is beer. When we're doing barley wines, we'll definitely always need nutrients, sometimes multiple nutrient additions, just to make sure our yeast are as healthy and not stressed out as possible during fermentation.
Yeah, and where that goes in is also really important. When we're doing the multiple things on barley wines, we're trying to hit it at specific points that the barley wine yeast would be getting more stressed or need this extra boost. Like when your Krausen starts to fall, your second edition of yeast nutrient is really nice at that point because the yeast is starting to go to sleep, it's starting to stop, and it's probably used up everything in there so far, but it's still active and going. So you add it to it, there's enough yeast to use all this nutrient still, and this nutrient will help it ferment all the way out. Versus something like quikes. Quikes yeast, especially if you're fermenting them warm, need nutrient, and they generally need the top a higher amount of nutrient going in.
Yeah.
These guys are aggressive fermenters, but that nutrient has to go in at the beginning. If you add it too late in quike, it's not going to use the nutrient, and you're going to get that nutrient flavor left over.
With quikes, they also like to multiply a lot, and so by the fact that they're creating so many new cells, that's another reason that it's very important to have the extra nutrients. Mm-hmm. Frazzle Penguin, always top-notch content. Still voting for wife versus wife. Will it beer? Thanks for the awesome answer. Hey, you're welcome. Thank you, Frazzle Penguin. We appreciate the super chat.
We definitely do.
We've talked a little bit about why we would blend certain nutrients, but we're not going to go too deep into that. The reason that we basically do to blend certain nutrients is to balance those nitrogen levels with inorganic and organic. We did get a question: would Fermate O work as well as Fermax for beers? And I don't know what Fermax is, but Fanmax is an actual White Labs yeast nutrient that I believe is designed to be competitive or in the same ballpark as Fermate O. Again, just has that organic source of nitrogen instead of DAP. But let's jump into, we're ready to jump into some...
Oh, wait, that was not at all.
Cookies. Let's jump into the different White Labs nutrients to kind of break them down and why I would use them. The first one is the White Labs generic nutrient. This is designed to just be a no-brainer. You can add it at some volume to any beer that you're doing or wine, and that does create diammonium phosphates and the essential vitamins that you need. As well as proteins and peptides. It has the stuff that yeast needs to grow, and basically it's designed to just be the no-brainer one that's going to create the least possible flavor. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. It just means it is has a balance of nitrogen from DAP and nitrogen from organic sources kind of already dialed in. So that's why you might just try a generic nutrient like the White Labs yeast nutrient, like Brewcraft's yeast nutrient, like Y-Yeast's generic yeast nutrient. They're kind of all in that same ballpark.
Did find the answer to your question on that. Oh man, I lost the chat. Where were you? The Fermax looks to be a inorganics, or that would be Fermade K, not Fermade O. But Fermade O will probably work just as well, especially if you're using it in beer. If you're using it in cider, wine, or seltzer, you might have to add a little bit of DAP to it.
Yeah.
All right, we were talking about White Labs.
Let's go into the generic nutrient. All of White Labs nutrients, by the way, are designed to go into the end of the boil or the whirlpool. The reason being, they purposely made their nutrients not break down in heat because they want to make sure that you can always add it at a temperature that will sanitize the nutrient, basically, so you are not risking infection at all. Because it obviously is a very healthy growth medium if any moisture is present, and so stuff will try to grow on it.
Yeah, actually, Yeast and Beast had a great comment on that. Adding nutrient is pretty much like giving somebody a fully furnished apartment with an Xbox and fully stocked fridge.
Stocked with what?
I mean, you taste... Well, actually, that is very important. Fully stocked. The difference between organic and the inorganic would be stocked with what? Mm-hmm. You know, the organic would be stocked with nice, really healthy foods that you're going to hate when you go to the fridge at 3 a.m. for a late night snack. And the Fermade, or not, yeah, I keep saying Fermade, but the inorganic there is going to be like all the fatty, unhealthy food, some good bacons in there, maybe a steak.
Steak. It's the taste yeast crave.
It is. All right.
Ruben Ramirez, what's up, guys? Hello from El Paso, Texas. What up,
Yeah.
Ruben? I will add that I do semi-frequently follow my fridge around and like from a distance, staring at it through binoculars.
Just to make sure that the food stays in there
Well, yeah, and that it's stocked.
and that it's stocked.
Yeah,
And you take creepy pictures of it from odd angles.
exactly.
Really low, so you can hopefully see under it.
Yeah. Very long-range lenses. All right, so FanMax Bio is I guess, the White Labs way to what am I trying to say? It's the White Labs way to have nutrient without DAP, so without that
That's
inorganic source of nitrogen.
This is what would be the organic sources. And when we're talking about organic and inorganic here, this is not like food where it's being grown organically or things like that. It's actually talking about chemistry at this point.
Yeah.
Organic chemistry or inorganic chemistry. The diammonium phosphate comes from an inorganic source or a non-carbon based source, basically. Where in the organic ones, it comes from a carbon based source, or it's coming a lot from yeast generally. So that's what we're talking about there. So if anybody's really worried about organic labels for food-wise, this is not it. No, this is chemistry. So yeah, FanMax. FanMax is the organic one. So this would be the Fermado. I'm not entirely sure what BSG calls it, but they'll always say that it has an organic nitrogen source on it.
Yep. Again, it contains the same peptone and yeast extract that provides essential fatty acids, free amino nitrogen, nucleic acids, vitamins, and minerals for our yeast. All these ones that are the organic or they don't have DAP will be more expensive. Just a heads up on that. Speaking of organic sources, there are reasons that sometimes people will use what's it called? The dead yeast cells, Cervomyces. Cervomyces is dead yeast cells as a nutrient as well. Basically, the only reason to use Cervomyces is if you have to like strictly follow Reinheitsgebot, because Reinheitsgebot you need to have water, yeast, barley, hops. Like that's your only things you can do. That's the only reason to do Cervomyces. Cervomyces is very expensive and not terribly effective. So those of you who are buying Cervomyces, stop it. Unless you need to follow Reinheitsgebot.
Yeah, or at least find out why you're actually doing what you're doing instead of people on the internet telling you. Besides us, do what we tell you.
Yeah, do everything that we tell you. We're perfect. The last one that comes from White Lab specifically that we have in stock is the Seltzer Max, and the Seltzer Max is just kind of like the proper pitch from Omega. It's designed to take care of everything, so you don't have to think about it, which is nice. They do the math and the sciencey parts for you. I will say we did a side by side with some Seltzer Max and some proper pitch, and then our own blend. Our own blend that we do for nutrient additions, and we do prefer our blend, which involves some DAP and some nutrients. So watch that video and find out why.
I will tell you our blend, from reading the ingredients from White Labs as well as Omega, our blend is not that much different from either two, but we spend a lot of time working on our fermentation. We know our system really well, and so it's just better tailored to what we do specifically. Specifically, actually, I said that wrong. It's tailored to us specifically, and that's actually something to keep in mind. If you're just trying to walk into your local homebrew store, grab something off the shelves and use, especially for seltzer, the proper nutrient, the Seltzer Max, these things are awesome. They work beautifully well, and they'll get you into making it, getting your process down, so then you can come back and start really fine-tuning and adjusting things to create the best product possible.
Yeah. I had something to add to that, and then I forgot it.
Oh, sorry.
I got lost in your beautiful sultry voice.
Yeah. Okay.
What I was gonna say. So what we found, the difference between our blend that we use and the ones from either using Proper Pitch or the Seltzer Max is both the Proper Pitch and the Seltzer Max, for whatever reason, regardless of yeast, ended up making the final seltzer taste champagne-y. It had that champagne-y kind of white winey quality.
Yeah.
And ours is just very neutral.
Yeah. Very neutral on that. And I think that's because, as I said, we worked on this a long time, and we developed our nutrient blend to match our fermentation for it. So we're not over or under on pretty much anything there, because we're weighing it out by grams and doing minute science on it. But again, these things are awesome. They work really well. They come in handy dandy little pouches that you just truck in, set it and forget it. I mean,
yeah.
If you want to make great seltzer, grab one of these, the Seltzer Max, grab the proper pitch, have at it. It's going to do some awesome things for you. It will be more towards the generic seltzers. If you want to make something more specifically towards you, something more individualized, take that time to really research it out and figure out what you're doing, what your yeast needs,
and be prepared for a lot of guess and check.
Exactly.
Here's a great question from Chris Edwards. What's the difference between using those blends and just using DAP? DAP is only the nitrogen source, which is think of that as like yeast food. That's you're going out and getting Wendy's for yourself, whereas the yeast nutrient has all the essential vitamins and proper proteins, base proteins for yeast reproduction, so they can be healthy. So it's do you want to fill up your yeast to make sure that they can eat, or do you want to make sure they're actually healthy and they're not getting stressed out?
You want to take a single vitamin or a multivitamin.
Yeah.
DAP or nitrogens is a very important part for yeast health. You really can't get fermentation without nitrogens in there. But if you only have the nitrogens, you'll get some fermentation, but you're not going to get great fermentation. You're going to get some disformities. You're going to get some improper structures. It's not going to be as good. So you definitely want to do the blends in there.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all we got for nutrient stuff. If you've got questions on that, feel free to throw them and we'll answer them at the end of the show. Let's jump into what you get from base malts. This is going to be a relatively quick topic, but a really important topic that I think not a lot of people fully understand. So we're just going to break down what all comes off of your base malts and what you're looking at when you're trying to choose and why you might choose some over the other. So the first thing that you get off of all base malts, and that's kind of the primary reason why I choose a base malt, is they've got to have a diastatic power, or the enzymatic ability to break down starches.
Also, Chris, we did answer it a little bit earlier. I don't know if you heard it. The Firm Max is closest to, from what we could find, just a generic inorganic yeast nutrient, which you're asking, it's closer to Firm 8K.
Yeah. When it comes to enzymatic power, there actually is a range when it comes to base malts. As a general rule of thumb, the darker the base malt, the less the enzymatic power. However, that's not universally true, because the breed of barley that's being used can also affect enzymatic ability. For example, Heidelberg is a naturally higher enzymatic grain than a lot of the base 2 rows that you would get, or a lot of the base grains for like an American 2 row. So Heidelberg is on the lighter end of the spectrum, and it is a very enzymatic, very powerful little light malt to use. The reason that the lighter end of the malts maintain their enzymes and tend to be more enzymatic than the darker end of the malts is because those enzymes do denature during the kilning process. Munich is an example of the darker end of what I would consider a base malt, and Munichs can be as dark as 10, even 20 level bond, and still have enough enzymatic ability to self-convert, meaning you can use 100% of that malt and it will still turn into beer.
What about Gamebrius 30L?
I think that still self-converts.
Self-converts.
But it doesn't have enough diastatic power to convert other things. So that's when you start getting into the issue of, is it a true base malt, or is it a just can do itself base malt?
Yeah, that is actually something also important to remember, is that some of these will self-convert, but they're going to have a hell of a time converting anything else, and then how much time it's going to take to convert. So if you're doing the Munich 30L to Munich 20L, that might be a 2-hour mash rather than an hour to get full conversion, or at least most conversion out of it.
Yeah, and you do have workarounds. Right now, we always recommend using OptiMash and ViscoBuster. Just having OptiMash in, I'm pretty sure you can fully convert like crystal malt or something like that, which we might try in an experiment at some point. But
I mean, it might be worth it just to make 100% crystal beer.
Yeah, because everyone knows how much we love crystal malts.
Yeah, and going from other things too, all the different English pale malts that are out there. The actual different breeds do different things. I know what most people use, the Archers that's used for Maris Otter, has a higher diastatic power than one of my favorites, the Chevalier malt.
Yeah.
On that, not just outside of the roasting process, the actual barley type itself does.
Yeah, and that's why they used to think of like 6-row as and a lot of distillers still think of 6-row, or if you're doing pre-prohibition lager, still think of using 6-row. 6-row is a higher overall protein malt, which also means higher enzymes. Enzymes are proteins. So usually those two things correlate, with the exception of something like wheat, which also has a lot of beta-glucans. But what was I talking about? Yeah, proteins. Protein.
Yeah, so there are some differences in there as well on those enzymatic powers.
Oh, I was saying 6-row sucks. Don't use it ever.
Yeah, I mean, you can use better things to achieve the same thing, like Heidelberg or Chit.
Or Heidelberg.
Yeah.
Weird question. What do you get? What do you get from Heidelberg malt?
What do you get? Yeah.
Great beer. No, Heidelberg is honestly a really great malt if you want to do fantastically light beers, like very, very, very gold, or not even gold, lighter than gold.
Like, I mean, this is
Pale. That's
light,
the word.
yellow, fizzy beer, but with flavor.
Yeah. You'll also get a little bit of that grainy texture from the Heidelberg malt, which I enjoy.
Peter always explains it this way. It's basically just light Pilsner malt. Is what it is. You don't quite get the touch of sweetness that you would from the Pilsner malt in there. It's just that nice graininess coming out of it.
Yeah. Comes in at 1.3L. So we kind of already alluded to this. Let's just go into the other thing that you get off of a base malt, and that is your base color. A lot of times people think of just building a beer with, they're going to have their 2-row, which is whatever neutral, and they're going to add their crystal malts or their darker malts to get color. There's a lot of variability when it comes to just using base malt. So you can get a huge range of colors and different hues, not even just different darknesses, but different hues based on your base malt. And that's one important thing to know when you're trying to shape what your beer is going to look like.
Yeah, and that's actually something that we talked about a little bit earlier, like the Munichs. Munich is an incredibly varied color as far as a base malt. I think, what is it, the best malts is 8 Lovibond, right around in there, and then Gambrinus, which is a Canadian company, goes all the way into 30.
There's plenty in the 20 range too. So
yeah,
all as base malts, all can self-convert, but that's a huge range of colors. And that's, if you used 100%, even 20L, your beer would be probably that 17 SRM, like deep red.
Deep red. Going
Red X, speaking of, that's another
Red X
example of a base malt.
Our red active malt from Viking, pretty much the same thing on there. And I mean, we've done it before, made 100% Red X beer, and you get a red coming out of it,
and
pure
that's
red.
That's what we're talking about with hues, because like if you use 100% Munich malt, for example, they say the color ends up being orangey, so it's like
it's a copper orange. I mean, it's beautiful. I absolutely love that color, but it's very much different.
Yes, than an actual red, like a nice poppy, ambery.
Yeah.
Is garnet the right word?
Garnet is really nice in there, but garnet, I mean, I think of Carafa and some darker malts where you're getting that garnet hued color from. Yeah. Maybe Care Munich.
Yeah. Oh, that's that's a hybrid. So 95 people are watching. Nice. High five, everybody. So think about when you're thinking about shaping your beer, don't only think about the color that you're going to get, but also the hue of that color. So it's not just about lightness and darkness. It's also about the pristine.
Actually, that's a great commentary on just the few malts we were talking about there. The Maris Otter and the Chevalier. Technically, they're both English heritage pale malts. In there, they're very close to the color range on there, but when you're using Maris Otter, it's that just kind of beautiful orange pale straw color coming out of it. If you're using Chevalier, which was probably used in the same exact ways through history, I mean, that's going to be a dark red color. That's going to have a lot more red hues to it. It's going to be on the very far end of the pale spectrum.
Yeah, and so that's kind of a fun way to play with shaping your beer. But we don't just make beer for color, we make beer for flavor too. So I want to talk about all the different ways that you get flavor off of base malts, because I think it's the least represented malt when it comes, like everybody thinks of like building the beer and they're like, oh, I really want to use Red X, I want to use Special X, I want to use this crystal malt, I want to use a lot of Munich malt, I want to like everything that's not, or chocolate, yeah, all the specialty malts, and they don't think about just building an awesome beer with a great flavorful base malt. Homebrew for Life, thumbs down, thank you.
Right. And talking about that, when we do barley wines here, they're pretty much a single malt going into it.
Oh, yeah.
And we get all the flavor from that malt as well as process.
Yeah.
Which process is huge, but we're not talking about that right now. But
Talk about building with simplicity.
Which is a good process.
Yeah. The simpler you make your stuff, the easier it is to find out why you like stuff, and that's why we like to throw out how much we love certain base malts. So like we'll throw out Heidelberg all the time. Heidelberg, you'll definitely want to use a little bit of acidulated malt if you've got like super hard or alkaline water. But other than that, you know, Heidelberg as a single malt is a fantastic, light, fizzy yellow, rocky, a little bit of graininess, like malt. And then on the other side, we have malts like Chevalier, one of Tim's favorite malts, which is like deep and rich, and it's got a lot of natural, nutty, almost oaky flavors.
There's a little bit of biscuitiness, but it's not. It's like biscuits rather than biscuity.
Yeah, no, so it's Bisquick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that I don't know.
It's waffles. Tastes like waffles.
Actually, a little bit more like waffles than biscuits in there. And that is, I mean, I've actually started using it as a specialty malt to add a slight touch of biscuitiness to some of our beers.
Yeah, even though it's a base malt. Comes in at, what, 4 Lovibond? Something like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's got deep, rich flavor and colors. Or my favorite malt, which is Halcyon. Halcyon's a lot more on the light side, but there's a noticeable texture that comes along with using Halcyon. It's the best malt in the world. Esteban Flemons, good Sunday morning. Thanks for keeping me entertained while I'm cleaning up my kegs. Any suggestion for keg cleaning? Corny and Sankey. So our overall process when it comes to keg cleaning is going to be some sort of alkaline or caustic. PBW is the easiest to get a hold of in the homebrew world, and I'll let it soak, and then I'll make sure to pump it through all the different dip tubes and lines and everything like that, and let it soak in the lines for a while. Once every, 2-3 months, you should probably take off your posts if you got a corny keg, and every once in a while you should also probably remove a spear and a Sankey keg, just to make sure there's not any nasties growing in places that you can't see and that the caustic has a tough time to get to. But yeah, get that caustic, let it soak in there for a solid couple minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. I think when we're doing our cycle, it's 3 minutes. But we're constantly cycling it
through.
And then give it a rinse and give it some sanitizing acid and call it a day.
My way to do that is to have an assistant brewer.
Yeah, exactly.
Or somebody that wants to help you out. And you're like, yeah, your job is now cleaning kegs.
Homebrew for Life says, Peter, you are right about PBW tablets. They are whack. It takes way too long for them to break down and work like regular PBW or OxyClean. They just kind of seem like a little bit of a gimmicky thing, and I think they're trying to go off of the Craftmeister, whatever it's called, like their gimmickiness with the whatever their oxidizing alkaline tablet is. But yeah, I just use PBW in a scoop. I don't need no tablets.
Don't need no tablets. A lot easier to break down when you have more surface area.
Although I do think they're going to send us some to test out. So we'll let you know for sure. There's also liquid PBW. Did you already get that?
Well, we're going to do a 3x3. Yeah, we already got it. So we got some liquid PBW. We'll do the powder PBW, and then we'll do the tablet PBW and show you. I
do think there's something to be said about liquid PBW. I think that one might be good. What were we talking about?
We were talking about
flavor?
base flavor on it.
Halcyon. Halcyon has a texture too, so I guess we'll add texture in as well. But Halcyon doesn't just have a really awesome, for being a neutral malt, it has a really awesome base flavor. I just call it a richness. It's like neutral but rich.
This is something with most of the English base malts that I'll say. Halcyon is a big one for this. Chevalier isn't quite as big and chewy as Halcyon is, but it has that nice big flavor. Golden Promise. Maris Otter might actually be, Spring the Pearl is probably the smallest mouthfeel, and then Maris Otter. But all of the English base malts do really seem to have that nice richness to them. But Halcyon, if you want to have your base 2-row, but have your beer still have substance to it, it is Halcyon 100%.
Absolutely. We use it for a lot of, just because of the fullness that it has for a lot of our hazies. It's the best flavor place to start if you want a big flavorful malt bill without it being malty. And by malty, I mean sweeter.
Yeah. And that's actually, the Maris itself tends to have sweet to it associated with it, where Halcyon is going to have that big boosted maltiness without having the sweetness that's normally associated with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of questions, but let's just go through the last thing that you want to be thinking about when it comes to base malts, and then we'll jump into all these questions. Another thing to think about is going to be lotterability. And that's really important to know, especially if you're using some, let's say, some local malts, some small batch, some really craft malts, so to speak. A lot of those are going to be high protein, and so you have to look at the level of chaff. All the holes and stuff like that, that's going to help separate and fluff up the mash. If it's not a very chaffy, I'm going to call it chaffy. If it's not a very chaffy malt, but it is also higher protein, your mash is going to get super, super, super gummy. And so you're really going to have to think about alternative ways to either reduce the protein, Visco Buster, or fluff up your mash with rice hulls.
This is actually something that I've noticed because we use so many different base malts in there. When I am using the fat, nice big old fat grains that normally are coming from the English pale malts, those are way less laudable than using Halcyon or using Pilsner in there.
Yeah.
Just because of the size of the grains, the size of everything that's in there. There's so much more stuff that isn't separating. You don't have as many holes to the kernel ratio, basically.
Yeah.
So that's where you're adding in Visco Buster, which really helps, but also rice hulls. Adding in rice hulls to 100% barley beers is something you should probably start doing for your lotterability. That will also up your efficiency, because if you can get everything to run out really nicely and really consistently, you're going to pull all the sugars out of your grains. That's actually something that's helped us out. Adjusting around, realizing in our lotterability, we probably jumped about 5% in our efficiency because we're getting all the sugars off our grains.
And getting rid of the proteins that are going to help impede things.
Yeah. So that's something to think about in there. I mean, if you're making something with a high proportion of Heidelberg, you're probably going to need it less. If you were throwing in like 100% base malt, well, if you're throwing in a Halcyon Hazy IPA, there you go. That's going to be way less laudable than doing a Heidelberg Hazy IPA. You're going to need more rice hulls as well as the Visco Buster in both. So that's something you got to think about as well.
I think that pretty much covers what you get off of base malts. Let me know what you thought about that. Was that good? Do you like the breakdowns that are a little bit more basic, where you just kind of like talk about the depth of knowledge on something that everyone kind of knows about but might not know as deep? For some of us, it's probably a lot of review, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to see if there's a nugget of information you didn't already have. So let me know if you like that. Let's go into some questions now. Matthew Moreno, can you soak gas and liquid disconnects and gaskets in 180-degree-ish water to kill yeasty beasties? Also, can you disassemble cheap picnic faucets to clean? So yes, the 180-degree-ish water will kill a lot of stuff. However, it's also gonna, without having an alkaline that's going to eat up the organic material, it's gonna leave a lot of sediment that can be a really awesome growth spot for new infectious stuff. So
while it'll kill everything off that's on it right at the moment, it will leave it all there and encourage other things to grow there.
Yeah.
So you should clean it as well as kill it.
And every once in a while there is a chance for sporulation. Not a lot of things that infect beer create spores, but spores are very, very temperature tolerant if that does happen.
Riviera, we have used some Gambrinus malts, particularly what we use out there is the Munich 30, and we stock the honey because that's honey malt, but we prefer to use brew malt instead.
Joel, Hey guys, do you give much information on the malts you carry? I'm asking because for less than 25 kilogram sacks, my homebrew shop does not say much else aside from type or color. To be honest, no. But we also take a lot of time to talk to customers that come in here. So if they want to know any information, we can give it pretty readily. Or we're pretty good at looking stuff up if we don't know information. So,
yeah, it's one of those things that if you're looking at the sack that's on the ground up there, yeah, you're probably getting the exact same thing you are from your local homebrew shop. It's not much. But if you want to know about that malt, we've probably used it, and we can probably tell you how we like to use it, what it's going to give to you, or we can at least direct you to the breakdown of analytics on that.
Yeah. And Weiser already commented, yeah, we do give a lot of information on the malts. That's just because we use them, but it's more verbal information, so it's not like if you're asking if we've got like an online thing that you can go and check out all the malts, we don't, but we do a lot of individual research on the malts.
The best way to find that out is honestly just going to the maltster and getting their breakdown on it.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh wow, homebrew for life. You're going. All right. Reverend Craig White, this is good. Knowing your water profile, he's talking about something very different here. Knowing your water profile is extremely important for the health of your beer, but also for cleaning. If you have a more alkaline water on that, you need to know that because it will affect your caustic and acid rinses, just as if you have a more acidic water where you're at.
Yeah.
So that is something very important to know, especially for cleaning on that, because you might need to change the chemicals you're using to actually get them to work. So, or the proportions of chemicals that you're using to get them to work.
Frazzle Penguin, mash fluffer, sounds like a viable career. Tim had a stint as a fluffer, and he made good money there. So
I did.
That's why we hired him here.
Nice.
Actually.
Exactly. And keep things nice and fluffy.
That's right. Using a spunning valve to pressure fermentate a warm lager versus traditional cold temperature on fermentation depends on your yeast. We've gotten this question quite a bit, and it's something that I feel like is very not as straightforward as a lot of people want it to be. They want it to be a direct answer. There are some yeasts that fermenting under pressure will perform phenomenally, make clean beer, and be awesome. It's a good hack. It will be a different flavor than a traditional lager fermentation with traditional lager yeasts, but it'll be a very, very clean beer, and it's a good hack. Most lager yeasts, fermenting warm, even under pressure, will be fruitier, so they're not going to be the same fermentation.
It's a great way to get around it. It's a great way to make the yeast think it's under cooler, but keep in mind it is going to be different. One of those things where you could probably raise it up to 58 and the yeast thinks it's fermenting more like 55.
Ruben Ramirez, what temperature do you guys usually use your caustic when cleaning kegs? Most of it's going to be 180-ish degrees.
Yeah. I like to get that temperature. Most of the caustics will tell you that they work better when they're around 150, 130 to 150-ish on there. But if you can get that heat to it, of course, the heat normally will make things a little bit more loose in there. The heat creates more energy in it. And it will also help kill things, so that's good.
Yeah, and when we're brewing downtown, our HLT is just automatically set to 180, so that's where it's at. But holding your water in the HLT warm specifically also serves to decarbonate the water, which reminds me we need to do an acid cycle on the HLT downtown.
Yeah, we do it spitting stuff.
But decarbonating means it's going to be pulling out bicarbonate from the water, which is going to be good for your caustic and also good for your beer.
Mm-hmm. That's actually on there. I skipped over that one by an accident. We were going to answer it. Melanoidin malt. What is it used for? What's the max?
Melanoidin malt's a pretty strong, I call it in that biscuit adjacent malts. Basically, it has a lot of melanoidins, or the byproduct of Maillard reaction, and it adds a lot of maltiness that's not necessarily sweet maltiness. So it adds, I call it like, if you've ever toasted a marshmallow to like brown and just peeled out the outside, what melanoidin malt offers is that peel.
Yeah, it's not exactly sugar sweet. It's malty rich sweet that you normally get from Maillard. max is not very much.
Yeah, you don't need like 5% maybe.
Maybe on that. And if you have the option, it's better to just create the melanoidins from the Maillard reaction yourself in
Boil
the
longer.
boil.
Yeah, also, so melanoidin malt, even though it has that melanoidin flavor, it doesn't have a lot of the other byproducts that come from naturally going through the Maillard reaction. Specifically, the byproducts that make the beer more shelf stable. So just doing a longer boil time or a decoction is going to be a better option for everything. But melanoidin malt can add richness to your beer.
Yeah. It's a shortcut for, boiling longer is what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
I ask everybody that works for me and every intern, what is the best catalyst in the world that we have on hand and in great volume? What is the best catalyst in the world that we have
Heat.
on hand and in great volume? I'm going to say water.
That's a solvent.
It is.
It's heat. Well, I think he just said that. Yeah, it's heat. Heat causes so many things we talk about it in enzymes. You got to get specific heats for specific things to happen. And, that's 100% true, Reverend. Things don't work unless they're at specific heats. And generally, more heat will make it work better-ish.
Super Life, hello, I'm new here. I just saw the video, how do I get carbonation in my brew naturally? 2 different ways. Close off whatever you're brewing. Make it a perfectly sealed container before it's done. That's a process called spunding. Or when you go to bottle, make sure you have live active yeast and you can add a sugar source in the bottle. Or you can do what's called forced carbonation, which means you put it in a bottle or keg and then put actual CO2 from a bottle into, and there are little attachments for like growlers that can do this, or like 2-liter bottles, or if you have a keg, then make sure it's cold because gas dissolves in cold temperatures, and let it sit at like 30 psi for a day.
There you go.
And then it's carbonated.
Nocturnal brewer. Out of all of them, all the yeast nutrients on the market, is there one that stands out to us? In all honesty, from using most of them, I tend to find that the standard, if you're going inorganic to inorganic to inorganic or organic to organic to organic, they're all pretty much the same. There can be ones that work a little bit better in different places, like the white labs are meant to not react to heat very much, so you throw it in at the end of the boil, where the Ferment K has you sterilize it and put it in right by fermentation. So depending on if you have filters, you're probably better going into a post-boil nutrient because you could filter out some nutrients. If you don't, it's probably just about the same.
Best way to add rice hulls in the mash on a 10-barrel system, before or after the grain intro? We go during. We have a really janky 7-barrel system that we use, and as we got grain coming through the grist hydrator, we'll just, every fourth of the grain load that goes into the mash tun, we'll just take a bunch of handfuls of rice hulls and toss them in there and stir it all up, and then go back to loading more grain.
Yeah, it's very labor intensive and it sucks. The best way to do that on a 10-barrel system is to have a mash tun with mash paddles in it that are automatic, and then you chuck it in and mix it in. But mix it in while you're putting your grain in. That way you can ensure a better, more even distribution in there.
Yeah. Super Life, thank you so much for your answer. I fermented rice water and it carbonated and I couldn't figure out what I did to recreate it. Awesome.
Nice. Is there a way to decoct a mash without 45 minutes of stirring mush? Kinda, but it's not true decoction. It's basically a step mash, and you're going to boil that part without the grains. You do miss some things when you do that, but
you still got a lot of proteins and sugars if you just take out the water and then boil the water on the side, so you still get a lot of that Maillard. The grains, whether or not they're super necessary, I don't know. If you just do a regular step mash by boiling part of the part of the wort and then putting it back in. I think that works pretty close.
It would be pretty close. I think there would be a little bit of roundness, a little bit of extra flavor that you're missing. Whether that's good or not, there will be a little bit missing because you're boiling the grains and you're leaching some flavors out of those. But man, just pull some off, boil it down a little bit for Maillard. Or a method that we actually found for one of our barley wines is when you're sparging off, taking a portion of that first runnings,
The thick stuff.
then boil that down and reduce it down into a molasses, and you'll get a lot of Maillard reactions. It's a little bit dangerous as far as flavor is concerned, because if you are not careful, it will burn fast.
Yeah.
But that's a great way to do it too.
25 years ago, we'd add yeast cake to the wort during the boil for nutrients. I still add expired yeast to boils when I have it. Bad idea? No, I mean, that's basically the same thing as Saccharomyces. The boiling process will actually break down the yeast. There's probably a small risk of sterols or fatty acids, but as long as you're not getting Band-Aid flavor, yeah, you should be good.
You should be all right. Yeah. I mean that's nutrients. It's a great way to do it. It's a really, really, really old method,
Yeah.
So why not? I mean, if you're into saving money, go for it. Nowadays, a lot of nutrients, honestly, good nutrients, are pretty darn cheap. If you have great practices, you're not getting infections, you're getting some good use out of it, go for it. But,
Yeah. All right, is that it for questions? We
That-
good?
that looks like we got questions right
Everyone give us a
there.
thumbs up. Everyone give the likes buttons. And then Tim's going to work on maybe answering a question or two more, and I'm going to work on closing this thing out so we can get open and we can let Warren start making some food.
Yeah. Is he coming in today?
Yeah.
Nice.
You're going to pick up a bunch of stuff and prep for, we're going to launch that mini tomorrow.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks guys for coming in. I thought I saw something else up in here. You know, it was a malt type, and actually I can tell you that we haven't used it. Gold Rush malt. Peter, we need some Gold Rush malt.
Prove it.
Well, Riviera asked if we've used it, and we haven't used it.
Get it for me.
So we need it.
Heating source, electrical or natural gas. Depends on where you live.
Depends on where you live. Sometimes, I mean, if you're in some places, natural gas is just a pittance, and you might as well just burn it because it's fun. Some places, electric is way cheaper on that. So that kind of depends on the prices where you're at for it.
That's pretty close, but I think we're natural gas cheaper.
Yeah, we're a little bit natural gas cheaper, and it depends on how efficient your system is on that. Too. If you're spending less time heating something up with electric, generally it'll be a little bit less cheaper. So, thank you, Reverend. This isn't my beer. That's awesome. Thanks, Joel, as well. Thanks for being here. We enjoy you guys on the live stream. So, here's a great one. Adam Foster, basic ingredient list for hard seltzer: water, sugar, yeast, nutrient. We use dextrose. That's actually a great thing there. We use dextrose. The more simple form of sugar you can get, the better. Table sugar is not the most simple form of sugar out there. It takes more effort for the yeast to break it down. So getting dextrose or glucose, the really, really simple sugar, is going to be a better fermentation for you and create better things.
David Collette, brew a dry hops blonde ale.
Brew it, David Collette. Laurel Cryle hops, any suggestion? Dry hop blonde ale. God, you guys are flowing them in. Thanks again. Last week's Ascorbs, great. Adam Foster, what kind of sugar? Again, dextrose on that. Yeah, there you are.
Ruindu Gunna Tilaki came towards the end of the live stream. He's like, ready for some knowledge.
Ready for some knowledge. Yeah, rewatch it and you'll get a little bit. Thanks for at least making it here. That's awesome. Reverend KY, Belgian candy. Yeah, actually, I mean, Belgian candy is really fermentable. That could be a really interesting seltzer. We should try it. Expensive, but interesting.
That's what we got Thomas for.
That is what we got Thomas for. Invert.
Honey seltzers.
Yeah. Invert sugar is a little bit different in the way that it ferments out in there, but if you want the cleanest product possible, the cleanest sugar possible. Okay, we're done. I'm not flying through any more of these. Thank you all for coming in. Thanks for tuning in to us. Thanks for liking, hint, hint, liking the video right now before we end it. Do make sure to subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our other channel, Genus Not Brewing, subscribe to all our social medias, individual social medias. We have a Discord, so you can join that Discord. We do general questions. You can have brewing questions answered on there too. We try and keep up for it as best as we can. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being with us. Super Life. Yeah, thank you. It's awesome. You guys keep us going. You know, this is why we do it. So, can add hops to hard seltzer and keep it clear? Yes, you can. If you boil your hops and, you know, get away from the hop haze, or, you know, do things to reduce the hop haze, go for it. There you go. So, everyone, smash the like button. Always got to smash it. That's right. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to smash this beer. We'll see you next time.